The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the thin walls of the cramped apartment at 4:30 a.m. But Marcus Chen was already awake. He'd been staring at the ceiling for the past hour, calculating and recalculating the numbers in his head. Rent was due in 3 days, Emma's school lunch account was overdrawn, and his daughter's worn-out sneakers had developed a hole so large that yesterday's rain had soaked through to her socks. At 34, Marcus had never imagined his life would look like this: a single father working 2 jobs, surviving on 3 hours of sleep, and still falling short every month. The irony wasn't lost on him that in a city filled with billion-dollar companies and tech moguls, he couldn't afford to buy his 8-year-old daughter a proper pair of shoes. But as he quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Emma in the next room, Marcus reminded himself of the same thing he told her every morning: we might not have much, but we have each other, and that's worth more than all the money in the world. What Marcus didn't know was that in exactly 4 hours, a simple case of mistaken identity would change not only his life, but the life of one of the most powerful CEOs in America. The email had arrived at 11:47 p.m. the previous night, just as Marcus was finishing his shift at the all-night diner. The subject line read, "Congratulations, welcome to Meridian Industries." His hands trembled as he read it on his cracked phone screen. Meridian Industries, the tech giant he'd applied to 6 months ago for a custodial position, the same company that had never responded to his application, leaving him to assume they'd moved on to other candidates. "We're pleased to offer you the position of Senior Operations Consultant, with a starting salary of $180,000 annually." The email continued. Marcus read it 3 times, certain there had to be a mistake. He'd applied for a night cleaning job that paid $15 an hour. Senior Operations Consultant. He barely had a high school diploma, having dropped out of college when Emma was born and his ex-wife left them both for a better life in California. But the email was addressed to him, Marcus Chen, with his correct social security number and address. The instructions were clear: report to the 47th floor of the Meridian Tower at 9 a.m. sharp for orientation. Marcus spent the rest of the night in a daze, torn between hope and disbelief. Maybe it was a miracle. Maybe someone had finally seen past his circumstances and recognized his work ethic. He'd been Employee of the Month at the diner 3 times running, always staying late, always willing to help. Perhaps that dedication had somehow reached the right person at Meridian. At 6 a.m., he gently woke Emma, her dark hair spread across the pillow like silk. "Daddy has to go somewhere special today," he whispered, smoothing her hair back. "Mrs. Rodriguez will take you to school, okay?" Emma's eyes, so much like her mother's, studied his face with the wisdom that only children who've grown up too fast possess. "Are you getting a new job, Daddy?" "Maybe, sweetheart. Cross your fingers for us." The Meridian Industries building stretched into the Seattle sky like a monument to human ambition. Marcus had passed it countless times on his way to work, but never imagined he'd step inside. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and glass, with water features that probably cost more than his annual income. Security guards in pristine uniforms directed a steady stream of employees to various elevators, each person looking like they belonged in this world of pressed suits and confident strides. Marcus clutched his one good shirt, a button-down he'd bought at Goodwill for job interviews, and approached the reception desk. His reflection in the polished marble made him acutely aware of his scuffed shoes and nervous energy. "Marcus Chen," he told the receptionist, a woman with perfect makeup and a smile that seemed professionally calibrated. "I'm here for orientation." She typed his name into her computer, her manicured nails clicking against the keys. "Ah yes, Mr. Chen. Please take elevator bank C to the 47th floor. They're expecting you." The elevator ride felt like ascending into another universe. Through the glass walls, Seattle spread out below him, looking smaller and more manageable than it felt when he was walking its streets looking for work. The 47th floor was a maze of glass offices and open workspaces, filled with people who moved with the purposeful energy of those who'd never wondered where their next meal would come from. "You must be Marcus." A woman in her 30s approached him, tablet in hand. "I'm Sarah, HR Director. Ready for your first day?" The orientation was a blur of presentations about company culture, benefit packages, and stock options. Marcus nodded along, afraid to ask questions that might reveal his confusion. When they discussed his previous experience in operational efficiency, he simply smiled and took notes, hoping he could figure out what they meant later. His office was on the corner of the floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Elliott Bay. The nameplate on the door read Marcus Chen, Senior Operations Consultant. Inside, a computer setup worth more than his car waited on a desk that could have served as a dining table. For his entire apartment, for the first week, Marcus survived on adrenaline and terror. He arrived early, stayed late, and spent his lunch breaks frantically Googling business terms he'd heard in meetings. Somehow, his years of managing chaotic dinner rushes and coordinating with suppliers had given him an intuitive understanding of workflow optimization. When he suggested reorganizing the company's vendor payment system, based on his experience with restaurant supply chains, his colleagues were impressed. Chen's got a fresh perspective. He overheard one manager tell another, "Sometimes an outside view is exactly what we need." The irony was almost painful. They thought his outside view was some sophisticated consulting technique, when in reality, he was just applying the survival skills he'd learned from keeping a diner running on minimum wage. But Marcus's real impact began when he started noticing the people everyone else overlooked. The night cleaning crew that emptied trash cans and vacuumed floors. The food service workers who restocked the executive break rooms. The security guards who stood at their posts for 12-hour shifts. These were his people, the invisible workforce that kept the gleaming corporate machine running. "Excuse me," Marcus said to a janitor one evening as he worked late. The man looked up, surprised that someone in a suit was talking to him. "I'm Marcus. I wanted to thank you for keeping our offices so clean." The janitor, whose name tag read Carlos, smiled uncertainly. "Just doing my job, sir." "Well, you do it well. I used to clean offices myself, so I know good work when I see it." Word spread quickly through the building's support staff. There was someone on the 47th floor who actually saw them as people, not just part of the furniture. Marcus began learning their names, asking about their families, and listening to their concerns. He discovered that the cleaning crew was being shortchanged on their break times, that the food service workers were dealing with broken equipment, that management had been ignoring for months, and that the security guards were working mandatory overtime without proper compensation. In his previous life, Marcus would have commiserated and moved on. These were systemic problems beyond his control. But now, inexplicably, he had a voice in this company. He had access to people who could make changes. The first memo he sent to upper management was carefully worded, professional, and passionate. He outlined how improving working conditions for support staff would increase efficiency, reduce turnover, and ultimately save the company money. He included specific cost-benefit analyses based on his experience managing tight budgets, and suggested concrete improvements. To his amazement, the response was immediate. Within 2 weeks, new equipment was installed, break schedules were adjusted, and overtime policies were clarified. Marcus watched Carlos smile with genuine warmth for the first time, and felt a satisfaction he'd never experienced in any job. But Marcus's biggest challenge wasn't the work, it was the growing weight of his deception. Every day, he expected someone to discover the mistake. Every email, every meeting, every casual conversation felt like walking a tightrope. He'd managed to extend Emma's after-school care by telling Mrs. Rodriguez he was working longer hours, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. The collapse came on a Tuesday morning. In October, exactly 3 months after he'd started, Marcus was in his office, reviewing proposals for a new employee wellness program, when Sarah from HR appeared in his doorway with a look he'd never seen before. "Marcus, we need to talk." His heart hammered as he followed her to a conference room, where 2 other HR representatives waited with serious expressions. A laptop sat open on the table, displaying what looked like personnel files. "We've discovered a discrepancy in your employment records," Sarah began. "It appears there was a mix-up during the hiring process." Marcus's throat went dry. "What kind of mix-up?" "We have 2 Marcus Chens in our system. One applied for a senior consulting position, Marcus Chen from Stanford, with an MBA and 15 years of experience. The other applied for a custodial position, Marcus Chen from Seattle, with a high school education and restaurant experience." The room fell silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. This was it. The dream was over. He'd go back to the diner, back to the cramped apartment, back to watching Emma wear shoes with holes in them. "I can explain," he started,